At the edge of an international border, at the edge of the Pacific, at the edge of innovation, community, education, and discovery, you're listening to At the Edge of It All, a University of San Diego podcast where USD experts speak on topics and stories that impact you and the broader community.
Hello and welcome back to our podcast, At the Edge of It All. I'm Lisette Martinez, joined here by Elena Gomez.
Welcome, everybody. And today our guest is Darbi Berry. She is the Director of Climate and Environmental Programs for the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative here at the University of San Diego. Darbi, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's exciting to be here. Thanks for having me.
Give us a little background on yourself and also the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. What is the kind of work that your team does?
Yeah, absolutely. So the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative has actually been around since 2011 in our region, but it has been housed at the University of San Diego since 2015. But we work across the region, so all the way from Oceanside to Imperial Beach and inland out to our eastern borders of our county, working on climate action. So all facets of climate action, we support our cities and public agencies working on energy efficiency, coastal resilience, water, intersections of climate change and equity, really just trying to help people identify best practices and how we can implement climate action solutions faster, more streamlined, and across, jurisdictional boundaries.
And I know one of the big things part of your work is coastal resilience. What is that for people that haven't heard that term?
Yeah, so coastal resilience is a really dynamic term. It is really responsive to the holistic view of our coastline and our beaches. And in the way that we approach it when we think about climate change and climate resilience on the coast, we can approach it from three directions. We approach it from the environmental impact. So how, are we persisting and maintaining our beaches and these healthy environmental coastal ecosystems, thinking about our wetlands and our dunes and, where you see all these beautiful seabirds and, marine mammals on the inside. But then also we look at it from an economic standpoint. So in the San Diego region, we have a little over 70 miles of coastlines, multiple bays and inlets, the big port of San Diego and San Diego Bay. We have Mission Bay, which is a massive recreational space for people who live here. But those are also really important centers of the economy. So, we have one of the busiest ports in the region in San Diego that brings in a lot of economic growth to our region. Millions of jobs are centered around these, recreational activities. And then the last thing that we can approach coastal resilience from is an equity standpoint. So, making sure that everyone has access to our beaches and coastal spaces and that these are places for everyone to thrive. Anyone's family can go and access these places and be able to soak in that natural resource that we have. So with coastal resilience, we approach the work from trying to harmonize those three E's: environment, equity, and economy, to make sure that into the future we have these spaces that are not just surviving but thriving.
And with the Climate Collaborative, there's a lot of people involved here. Darbi, can you tell us a little bit about who you work with?
Yeah, so our network has about 29 official member agencies. So we work mostly to provide resources, learning, and networking opportunity to public agency staff. So we focus mostly on cities and our public agencies, so like the Port of San Diego, the airport, these kind of, intricate pieces of that are municipal systems. So we really focus on the staff level individuals, but we reach about 600 climate practitioners across the San Diego region. So 600 individuals that we, connect with across those different areas that I talked about: energy, water, coastal resilience being a big one as well.
What are some of the most exciting projects or things that come out of this collaborative for you as you've seen it so far?
Yeah, so I think, recently we've been really focused on the coastal resilience piece that Elena mentioned earlier, but we also have a lot of work in the energy space. So when we think about climate resilience holistically, there's kind of two big buckets that people work in. One is probably what most people are familiar with, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's referred to as mitigation. So at the Climate Collaborative, we do a lot of work on helping public agencies make bigger impacts by reducing their greenhouse gases, and have done a lot of work in the building energy sector, and helping the public agency staff figure out how to, adopt different ordinances or implement different practices within the buildings that our cities own, to make them more energy efficient. So really overall reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one of our projects I'm really excited about.
And I know a lot with climate resilience is this idea of sort of adapting to some of the climate changes. So building infrastructure along our coastlines and trying to sort of, I guess, live with climate change or adapt to what we're seeing. Is that sort of what that looks like too?
Yeah, so that mitigation bucket is kind of, half of the climate work, but the adaptation bucket is the other half. And it's really acknowledging that some of the impacts from climate change are already happening. We're living with them every day. We're seeing heat waves both across the U.S., but also globally. These are, impacts from climate change. And they're also things that, you and I need to live with each and every day. So thinking about climate resilience holistically, when we think about adaptation, it's really taking those steps to reduce the impacts of climate change as they are physically felt within our infrastructure. So, creating opportunities for us to go about our daily lives where the infrastructure is so that climate impacts aren't really affecting us.
When we talk about climate change, it may seem like such a daunting, phrase, words for a lot of people, but I'm very inspired by the younger generations and how important this is for them. We see it here on our campus all the time. I talk to my daughter about that. Can you give us some advice or some insight into how each and every one of us can start with little tiny things to make an impact when we talk about climate change and things that we need to do to make this earth a better place?
Yeah, so climate is daunting, right? Like it is a global challenge. But I think, the message that I try to remind people to live by is to think global, but act local. So, while
I like that, Darby.
Yeah, thank you. But I think, as we, approach climate, it is really impacting across the globe in different ways. But here in San Diego, there is a really big opportunity for individuals to kind of harness that motivation and really make these impacts in our communities. And so one of the best ways to get involved in climate change is, both to think about these sustainable, personal solutions like, bringing reusable grocery bags, making these kind of smaller changes in your lifestyle. I like to think about that as adaptation. You are taking steps to make these climate change future easier for you because you're adjusting that to your lifestyle. But then these bigger steps that you can take is getting involved in, a local organization, getting involved in your community planning meetings, and being really participatory in your local city government, and thinking about, if you're really interested in, parks or green space, find something that motivates you that is related to the climate and really focus on that because that's where you are going to feel the local impact of your efforts.
What would you say would be some steps people could take? Would it be sort of reflecting on what they're doing now or doing one step? Or what would you say would be I think we're all using sort of reusable bags, or most of us are now. So we've sort of adapted, as you said. Is there anything else that you do that is easy on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think there's actually a really wonderful climate scientist and marine biologist, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who has been approaching climate from telling people to find what they're passionate about. So making this Venn diagram of what are you good at, what do you like to do, and what are you passionate about, and find that climate solution that sits in the middle and just go in on that because this is big and daunting, and so are the rest of our lives, right? The rest of our lives are super busy. So it's really important to find something at that intersection, so finding what it is for you. For me personally, I have gotten really into gardening. Because spending time, even if it's small spaces, we used to garden on our apartment patio front porch, and just having that one thing, that connection to the earth really was motivating for me.
That's really cool. I see a lot of that nowadays. My daughter's elementary school has a garden right outside of the school that parents come and volunteer and man, and they bring the different classes during different days, and they grow their own vegetables, and they watch that whole process, and then in the end they pick them and they eat them in the cafeteria. It's really, really cool to see that and to know that simple things like that can get you to start being more connected to the earth and to the situations that we're living in now.
Yeah, definitely. To tie it back a little bit to sort of our local beaches here in San Diego and just everywhere, really, what is the status of our beaches? I feel like a lot of times we go to the beach and we enjoy our time. It looks like the beach we knew 20 years ago, but probably for someone like you're seeing all of the maybe erosion or different elements. How have our beaches changed? Where are they now? Are they in a good place? Does it need some work?
Yeah, so both the cool part and the really challenging part about coastal ecosystems is that they are dynamic, right? Our beaches move, they ebb and flow. And so when we kind of approach them, we see these natural day-to-day changes. And so when you and I go to the beach, once a month, every other month, we don't really notice those small changes. But, across the San Diego region, we are losing some of that access to our beach spaces consistently. Some of it is due to erosion. So, recently there was a big cliff collapse up in Encinitas, and the pathway down to Beacons Beach, which is a really popular beach for that community and a big surfing spot, people couldn't get to anymore, right? And so they're still repairing that walkway down. So that's one facet of our beaches, that we're losing kind of consistent access due to these different facets of erosion, be it, no longer having as much sand, or also during the winter time, we're seeing much higher and more frequent king tides that are kind of breaching the spaces that we can access. So, when we see king tides, which is kind of the highest high tides of, they're frequently in the winter season, in Mission Beach, for example, the water is coming right up to that boardwalk where people are biking. So there's no more beach for you to go to, right? You can go and look at it, but you're not going to be playing or making sandcastles in the sand. That's for sure. But there's also this second aspect of the beaches that we really need to pay attention to, which is, our beaches are connected to our inland communities here in San Diego. We have 11 coastal watersheds from Oceanside down through IB to the border. And those watersheds run east to west, so up and inland into our communities where most of us live. And the pollution impacts that happen upstream are going to happen downstream. So both from the access to the coast space, meaning, where are the beaches? Do we still have them? But also this pollution, idea too of, what's going into our canyons and what's going into our watersheds that's washing into our coastlines. And so, we're seeing it especially down in our really vulnerable communities along Imperial Beach and Coronado, due to the pollution in the watershed. While the beaches are there, you can't go in the water because the bacteria in the water is dangerous for us to swim in. So there's kind of this twofold thing happening here with coastal resilience that we need to pay attention to.
And that's when we talk about that word environmental justice, right? When we want to be equitable when it comes to what parts of the environment in general that everyone can benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to think about who benefits when we think about the coastline, and also where our access points are. One aspect of a project that we're working on right now is looking at trying to find solutions to reconnect some of our inland communities to the coast. And one big thing that came up at a survey that we did was people need more transit options. They need more mobility that's not just, a single family car to get to the beach. So, neighborhoods and communities that don't necessarily have that mobility freedom are losing out on a big, community asset of our coastline.
Right. Try to go to any beach around here and you will never find parking.
Yeah, you're not going to find parking, and you can't get a bus to get there. So
right.
It's this catch-22.
You know what? Before we wrap this up, I really always like to know how people got to where they're at, and how did you become what you are today? You're so passionate about this, just so much work, incredible work. How did you get started in this?
Yeah, so I actually grew up on the east coast of Florida, and spent every first kind of into fall waiting for a hurricane to cancel school as a kid. Just, where I grew up, that was always kind of the thing. It came around right at this first time of school, and you'd always kind of hope that the first week of school got canceled. But as I got older, I kind of realized, oh, this is bad. This is not just like a fun get out of school storm. This is actually really, dangerous and daunting. And, the more I learned about climate change, I realized that that's going to be happening more frequently. And, the small coastal town that I grew up in is really vulnerable to not being there in my old age, or if I, choose to have kids, it might not be there for them. And was a really big motivating factor for me to, go to school and become an environmental scientist.
Well, and we are so very glad that you did, right? Very excited that you did. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for talking to us about this incredible and very important topic. And don't you forget that you can subscribe and continue to follow us for even more wonderful stories and experts.